This shot of Babylon from Intolerance, more than 100 years later, it still just blows me away. There's just something inherent, something intangible about it that I sense. I can tell these are really 4 or 5-story sets, and that there are hundreds of actors wearing costumes. And I just react to it, even today, that this is something really special and something that needs to be recognized and paid attention to. But incredibly, this shot was also a special effect. They used theater stagecraft effects because all of these elements are actually props. There's space between them, but we don't see that because of the way the camera is positioned. So when they made Intolerance, Griffith's studio was right where Hollywood Boulevard merges into Sunset Boulevard. And he built the set on this elaborate open field. It covers 4 blocks. But here's where they built the sets, and you can see how they're spaced out. And here's another view. And here's a photo taken from the corner of Clayton and Talmadge. And looking in even closer, you can see how all the elements of the set are spaced apart. And this is fun. They built a giant ramp so they could bring horses and chariots up to the top of the wall. And there, of course, is the entrance gate. But what I find absolutely captivating about this is more than 100 years later, these 2 homes that witnessed the making of Intolerance, they're still standing, and we can look at them today. So this is a brutal scene. When the workers' modest wages are cut, they go on strike, only to be gunned down by the militia and armed strikebreakers. It's really a brutal scene. And film historian Russell Merritt contacted me recently. He wanted to know where this was filmed. And Russell correctly reported that this association never existed. And he also noticed that these are actually signs that were put onto the buildings, apparently to protect the real companies from bad publicity. But if you study the film closely, you can see there was a series of warehouses. And you can travel along the scene further south. And traveling further south, closer still, you can see between the last 2 warehouses, there was this giant opening that was fenced off, and you could even see the same gatehouse. And there's the little bulletin board. So here they post the notice that everyone's wages are being cut. And I noticed this tantalizing little clue in the background. Well, it turns out there was a Giambastiani fuel company, but the city directories listed it at inconclusive addresses. So it was kind of a dead end. But Russell found this wonderful black and white photo that showed they also had at least one building right along the Los Angeles River. So that was the key. So this is, we're looking east. This is around 1922. There's the Plaza de Los Angeles in the foreground, and that's Chinatown there in the center. And hold on. This is how it looks today. Look at the freeway. They built the Union train station. Anyway, it's quite a difference a century makes. So cameraman Carl Brown reported that the warehouse strike was filmed somewhere in the warehouse district, but that really wasn't much of a clue. But now we knew to look by the Los Angeles River. And there is the site of the strike. It was on the opposite side of the river along Mission Road. And there was a rail line that ran between these two buildings. So here's a 1906 map, and you can see how the pitched roofs and the corners of the buildings, they all line up perfectly with the map. And then here you can see on Elliott, the train tracks passing through. So this is an early 1930s photograph. There's Mission Road, and then there's Elliott. And by this time, a couple of the warehouse buildings had already been torn down. But if you were to stand at Elliott and look east, your field of view would take in this bridge in this isolated house standing on this bluff. So we're looking east, we're on Elliott, and you can see at the bottom, you can see the shadow of Billy Bitzer and D.W. Griffith themselves filming the scene. But there's the field of view, and pulling in, you can see the same bridge and that same isolated house on the bluff. Now, it turns out this was a before photo. They had plans to completely widen the Gulf, which they did. And here's the after photo. Once they took out the Gulf, they could put this new road in. And that was very handy because later on, they'd already eliminated the Gulf when they needed to build the freeway. And it turns out that this one bridge that appears in the background is the lone artifact visible during the strike scene that's still standing today. And you can actually visit Elliott. The railroad rights-of-way seem to be perpetual. And as best I can guess, that little asphalt trail is where the tracks once stood. So the strike scene took place here on Mission Road, east of the river. But there was this other little neighborhood on Ducommon on Alameda Street. And on the corner, that is the Strasburg Hotel. And below it to the south was this large brick warehouse. And in between the two was this unusual triangular building. Now this movie was from the Library of Congress. It was identified at Mostly Lost, but you can see the triangular building and you can see the brick warehouse. And it helps get your bearings for the kid. Chaplin filmed the rooftop chase from the kid on this street. And also when he jumps aboard the orphanage truck, he's traveling down this little alley. So this view really gives you a clear sense of the location where Charlie filmed these scenes. But it also figures into Intolerance. When his wife, Mae Marsh, is attacked, Bobby Heron rushes to the hotel to rescue her. And during the struggle, Miriam Cooper actually shoots the attacker. And you can see behind Bobby the same triangular building and the same brick warehouse. But that's not all. So when Buster signals a left-hand turn during Cops, there again is that same triangular building. And in fact, that's the same doorway appearing in both films. This was a really incredible location. It would have been an amazing place to visit, but most of it was torn down, I think, in around 1924. And it turns out this was Buster's favorite place to shoot. He shot The Goat and Cops there, and he probably filmed close to 20 different point of view shots. These are just some of them, but by a wide margin, this was Buster Keaton's most favorite place to shoot in all of Los Angeles. And you can't really see it anymore. But to give you one more little Buster connection, he gets his jacket cut up on this post, and that is the same doorway. And in fact, I think the reason why Bobby Harron looks so shocked is that the doorway would later be defiled by this ad for cigarettes. So, although innocent, Bobby is sentenced to death for murdering his wife's attacker. Consumed by guilt, Miriam finally confesses that she was the real killer. So the frantic race begins to catch the governor in time to stop the execution. And it's really exciting. Are they going to make it? And the race to catch the governor's train, DW had good practice filming these scenes because there's a very similar scene in the Mary Pickford film, A Beast at Bay. And for both of these chase scenes, they both originated at the Inglewood train station, where Buster filmed 1 week. They successfully stopped the governor's train at the Weisburn station. And you can see this is where Buster made his grand entrance during the goat. So May pleads for mercy. Don't execute my innocent husband, but to no avail. But when Miriam confesses she's the killer, you can see this address in the background. And they didn't make it easy because they changed the name of the street twice. But it turns out the address is still there. You can still see the stairway going through the retaining wall where they plead with the governor for mercy. And around the corner, here's where Miriam Cooper debates whether to confess. And she almost changes her mind, but you can see the side steps that went through the retaining wall, the side entryway. And here's that side stairway. And using some footage from The Mother and the Law, you can even see further down the street that a couple of homes on Benton Way are still standing. But what about the house the governor is visiting? Well, it turns out that house is still standing too. How can that be? Well, I followed a hunch and I checked the building records, and it turns out they moved the governor's home from the very large lot on the corner to a vacant lot nearby. So we have this remarkable situation where both the stairway and the house are both still standing. This is the first sort of hybrid location. They both still exist. They're around the corner from each other, and together they make one complete location discovery.